The sound that stopped Lieutenant Ethan Cole dead in the middle of a school hallway was not a scream. It was laughter. And it was the specific kind of laughter that every person who has ever been its target recognizes immediately. The kind that has nothing to do with joy. Through the closed door of room 112, he heard his daughter's name, then a woman's voice, sharp and practiced. "We have been over this 3 times, Maya, 3 times." A pause that carried contempt in it. "If you cannot keep up, this program cannot help you." If this story moves something in you, subscribe to our channel and follow it all the way to the end. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this one travels. Ethan had been back on American soil for 11 hours. The deployment had run 7 months and 3 weeks. Longer than projected. Longer than the orders said. Longer than the voicemails from Maya had prepared him for. He had driven straight from the base to Harlow Elementary in Coronado, because he had told himself the whole flight home that the first thing he was going to do when his boots touched California ground was walk through those school doors and watch Maya's face when she saw him. Delta was in the back seat of the truck, tan and gold and black, amber eyes tracking Ethan through the rear window the way he always tracked him, the way he had tracked him through 4 deployments and 11 countries, and more situations than either of them had names for anymore. When Ethan cut the engine, Delta stood up. Ready. Always ready. "Easy," Ethan said. "This one's a school pickup." Delta sat back down, but his ears stayed forward. Ethan had listened to Maya's voicemail 6 times on the flight home. She had left it 4 days ago, and her voice in it was careful and too cheerful in the way that children get when they are trying to protect the person they are talking to. She said school was fine. She said she had made a friend named Priya. She said she missed Delta and asked if he could come when Ethan picked her up. She did not say anything about the intervention program. She did not say anything about room 112 or the woman who ran it. She did not say what had happened on Wednesday or Thursday or the Wednesday before that. She was 8 years old, and she had already learned which things were worth worrying her father about, and which things she was supposed to carry alone. That knowledge lived in Ethan's chest like something with weight. He signed in at the front office, clipped Delta's working vest, and took the visitor badge from the administrator without breaking stride. He knew the layout. He had memorized it the way he memorized every environment he was going to operate in. Room 112 was the intervention resource room at the east end of the building. The room where Maya spent 2 hours every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon working with Vice Principal Karen Driscoll on what the intake paperwork had described as targeted fine motor and processing support. He was walking the east corridor when he heard it. Not the laughter first, the voice first. A woman's voice through a closed door, professionally modulated, but not professional enough to hide what was underneath it. "Your father is a very busy man, Maya. I'm sure he would want you to take this seriously." A pause. "Would you like me to call him and explain why we are not making progress?" Ethan stopped walking. Delta stopped with him. And then Delta did the thing he did when he had identified something. He went completely still. Not aggressive. Not making a sound. Just still. The way a dog goes still when every frequency it possesses has locked onto a single point and is waiting for direction. "No, ma'am." Maya's voice, small, held tight. "Then pick up the peg and place it in the board. We have been sitting here for 20 minutes. My hands are tired." "Your hands are tired because you are not trying. There is a difference." Ethan's hand was on the door handle before he had made a conscious decision to put it there. He stopped himself. Not because he was not going in. He was going in. He stopped himself for 4 seconds because he was a Navy SEAL, and he had learned that the 4 seconds between the impulse and the action were often the 4 seconds that determined every outcome after. He breathed. He listened. He calculated. Then he opened the door the way he always opened doors he had not been through before. Slowly. With his full attention. With Delta at his left knee, moving in perfect silence. What he saw. Maya at a small table near the window, her forearm crutches leaning against the wall behind her, her hands working a fine motor activity, small pegs into a pegboard, her fingers trembling slightly with the effort. Her face was very still, in the way that faces get when the person wearing them has decided that showing anything would cost too much. Two other children sat at separate tables with their own work, both of them not looking at Maya with the careful deliberateness of kids who had learned that watching was dangerous. Vice Principal Karen Driscoll stood at the head of the table with a clipboard against her chest, and the expression of a woman who had spent a long time in a room where her authority was not questioned, and had developed a particular relationship with the sound of her own voice as a result. She looked up when the door opened. Maya looked up half a second later. Maya's face did what faces do when the person you have been trying to be brave for finally walks through the door. It cracked open, not into tears, into something more complicated than tears, something that was relief and exhaustion and love and the specific vulnerability of a child who had been holding something very heavy for a very long time and had just been told she could put it down. "Dad," she said. Just that. Just his name. Delta did not wait. He crossed the room in 4 steps, lowered himself to the floor beside Maya's chair, and put his head on her knee. He did not make a sound. He just stayed, his amber eyes moving to her face and holding there, with the total attention of an animal that had made a decision about who mattered in this room and was not revising it. Maya's trembling hands unclenched from the pegboard pegs. She put one palm on Delta's head and kept it there. Driscoll recovered fast. Ethan could see the recovery happening in real time, the way a person shifts from one register to another when the situation requires a different performance. She straightened. She smiled. It was a professional smile, the kind assembled from practice rather than feeling. "Mr. Cole, we weren't expecting you until next week." "Lieutenant Cole," Ethan said, not correcting her, just stating a fact. "And I came early." "Of course. How wonderful." She glanced at Delta with a particular wariness of someone who was deciding how to manage an unexpected variable. "I'm afraid we don't typically allow animals in the intervention space. Liability concerns." "Delta is a certified military working dog," Ethan said. "He's covered under federal service animal provisions." He was not looking at her. He was looking at Maya. "Hi, Bug." "Hi, Dad." Maya's voice came out steadier than it had any right to be. "You okay?" A pause that lasted 1 second too long. "Yeah." Ethan looked at Driscoll then, really looked at her, the way he looked at things he needed to fully understand before he decided what to do about them. "I heard what you said to her through the door," he said, "about calling me to explain why she wasn't making progress." Driscoll's smile adjusted by 3 degrees. "I was trying to motivate her. Sometimes children respond to—" "Her hands were tired," Ethan said. "She told you that." Fine motor fatigue is a common avoidance strategy in students with her profile. Part of our work here is helping Maya push through. "Push through," Ethan repeated. "Build resilience, tolerance for productive struggle. These are critical developmental skills and—" "How long has she been in this session today?" Driscoll checked her clipboard. 50 minutes. "And in the 50 minutes before I walked in, how many times did she successfully complete the peg placement?" "A beat. Progress is not always linear." "How many times?" Driscoll's smile held, but her eyes did something different behind it. "We were working toward completion when you arrived." Ethan looked at the pegboard on the table. 11 pegs placed out of what appeared to be 40. He looked at Maya's hands, still resting on Delta's head. He could see the slight tremor in her fingers from here. "Maya," he said quietly, How long have your hands been hurting?" Maya looked at him, then at Driscoll, then back at him. And in that sequence of glances, Ethan saw everything he needed to see about what had been happening in room 112, and how long it had been happening, and what Maya had decided was, and was not, safe to say out loud in this room. "A while," Maya said. Ethan nodded once. He pulled out his phone. "I want to play you something," he said to Driscoll. He found the voicemail. He pressed play. Maya's voice filled the small room, careful and cheerful, and talking about school being fine, and making a friend, and missing Delta. And then at the end, in the half-second before the message cut off, a sound. Not words. The sound of a child who has been holding something in for so long that the container has started to crack. Brief, almost nothing. But a trained ear, an ear that had learned to read environments and identify the things people were trying not to show, heard it with absolute clarity. Driscoll's clipboard shifted against her chest. "That is my daughter," Ethan said. "She left me that message 4 days ago while I was deployed. And what you just heard at the end, that sound right there, that is what 7 months of this program has built in her." His voice stayed level. It stayed completely level because his daughter was in the room, and she needed level. "I would like to understand exactly what has been happening here. Not the program description from the intake paperwork. What has actually been happening?" Driscoll opened her mouth. The door opened behind Ethan before she could speak. A woman in her mid-30s stepped into the doorway and stopped when she saw him. She had a folder in her hands and the expression of someone who had been waiting for this exact moment for a very long time, and could not quite believe it had arrived. "Lieutenant Cole," she said. He looked at her. "You know who I am." "I'm Priya Nair. I'm Maya's homeroom teacher." She held out the folder. "I've been keeping this for 6 months. I didn't know who to give it to." She looked at Driscoll, then back at Ethan. "I think you should see it." Driscoll's voice came out sharp and fast. "Ms. Nair, this is a closed session. You don't have authorization to—" "She's my daughter's teacher," Ethan said. "She can stay." He took the folder. "Thank you for coming." Priya Nair looked at Maya, who was watching all of this from her chair with Delta's head still on her knee and her hand still on his back, her eyes moving between the adults with the focused comprehension of a child who understood that something important was being decided on her behalf and was trying very hard to be brave about it. "Hi, Maya," Priya said softly. "Hi, Miss Nair," Maya said. "You did really good today," Priya said. "Really good." Maya's chin wobbled. She pressed her lips together and held it. Delta's tail moved once against the floor, slow and deliberate, and she tightened her hand in his fur. Ethan opened the folder. The first page was a handwritten incident log. Dated. Specific. 12 entries over 6 months, each one describing what Ms. Nair had observed or been told by Maya during regular classroom time. The language was careful and professional, and underneath it, held in by the precision of someone who had understood that this document might someday matter in a formal setting, was the unmistakable shape of controlled fury. He read the first 3 entries without looking up. When he looked up, Driscoll was watching him with the expression of a person recalculating something. "How far back does this go?" he said to Priya. "October," she said. "The 2nd week of October. That was the first time Maya came back from a session and couldn't stop shaking." Maya looked at the table. "She told me her hands hurt," Priya said. "I asked if she had told Ms. Driscoll. She said she had. I asked what Ms. Driscoll said." Priya paused. "Maya said she told her that hurting was part of getting better." The room was very quiet. Delta lifted his head from Maya's knee and looked at Driscoll. He did not growl. He did not move. He just looked at her with those amber eyes, calm and total and completely without performance. The look of an animal that has finished assessing a situation and arrived at a conclusion. Driscoll looked away first. "I'd like to continue this conversation with Principal Garrett present," she said. Her voice had shifted again, tighter now, more careful. "I think that would be appropriate." "I think that would be appropriate too," Ethan said. He closed the folder. He looked at Maya. "You want to come with me or wait here with Miss Nair and Delta?" Maya looked at Delta. Delta looked back at her, with the amber-eyed steadiness of an animal who had already made his position on the question completely clear. "Delta," she said. "Yeah," Ethan said. "I figured." He put his hand briefly on top of her head as he passed her chair. The specific kind of touch that does not ask anything and does not explain anything, and means only one thing, which is, "I am here. I see you." Nothing that happened in this room while I was gone is going to stay the way it was. Then he walked out into the corridor to find Principal Garrett, and behind him, in room 112, Delta stayed exactly where he was, his head back on Maya's knee, his amber eyes watching the door, his whole body a steady and absolute declaration that this child was not alone and was not going to be alone, and that whoever needed to understand that had better start understanding it now. Principal Howard Garrett was a man who had spent 30 years in education developing a very specific skill, which was the ability to look at a problem and see, simultaneously, what the problem actually was and what it would cost him personally to address it. He had that expression on his face when Ethan walked into his office. The expression of a man running two calculations at the same time and not entirely comfortable with either result. He stood when Ethan entered. He extended his hand. "Lieutenant Cole, I wasn't aware you were back stateside. I came early," Ethan said. He did not sit down. He put Priya Nair's folder on Garrett's desk and left his hand on top of it. "I need to talk to you about my daughter." Garrett looked at the folder, then at Driscoll, who had followed them in and taken a position near the window, with the careful neutrality of someone who had decided the best strategy was to take up as little space as possible until she understood how this was going to go. Then back at Ethan. "Of course," Garrett said. "Please, sit. I'm fine standing." Garrett sat. He folded his hands on his desk in the way of a man who needed something to do with them. "I understand there was an incident in the intervention room this afternoon." "There wasn't an incident," Ethan said. "I walked into a room where my 8-year-old daughter was being told that her pain was an avoidance strategy." He opened the folder. "I want to talk about what's been happening before this afternoon." He turned the folder around so Garrett could read the first page of Priya's incident log. Garrett read it. His expression went through something. Not quite guilt. The specific discomfort of a person who is recognizing, in real time, the distance between what he thought was happening in his school and what was actually happening. "Ms. Nair's documentation," he said. "Her documentation," Ethan confirmed. 6 months of it. 12 entries. Specific dates, specific observations. Specific things my daughter said when she came back to the regular classroom after intervention sessions. He waited while Garrett read the second entry. Then the third. "I want to ask you something directly, and I'd like a direct answer." Garrett looked up. "Did you receive a written complaint from Ms. Nair about the intervention program?" A pause. "Our complaint process involves several layers of, did you receive a written complaint from Ms. Nair?" Garrett's hands moved on his desk. "I receive a significant volume of internal communications and, Mr. Garrett," Ethan's voice stayed completely level. "I have been awake for 31 hours. I spent 7 months in a location I cannot name, making decisions in environments where the cost of an indirect answer was measured in human lives. I am standing in your office asking you a yes or no question about my daughter. I would like a yes or no answer." The room was very quiet. Garrett said, "Yes." "How many?" Another pause, smaller this time. 2. Ethan looked at him for 3 seconds. And what action did you take? Garrett's jaw worked. The complaint review process at the district level requires, what action did you take? I logged them into the review queue. The standard timeline for internal review is 8 to 16 weeks, depending on the nature of the complaint and the availability of the relevant. The first complaint was filed 8 weeks ago, Priya said from the doorway. She had followed them from room 112 and was standing with her arms crossed and the expression of a woman who had been waiting for someone to ask exactly these questions for a very long time. The second was filed 6 weeks ago. Neither of them has been acknowledged. I checked the parent communication portal 2 days ago. There is no record of either complaint in the system visible to parents or staff. Garrett looked at her, then at Driscoll. Driscoll said, the portal update schedule runs on a 30-day cycle. The entries would not have been visible yet. They would have been visible to you, Ethan said. Driscoll said nothing. I have one more question, Ethan said. He looked at Garrett. How many students are currently enrolled in the intervention program? Garrett opened a drawer, pulled out a sheet. 19. And how many of those 19 students have a current independent educational evaluation on file that specifically recommends intervention placement at this level? Garrett looked at the sheet. He looked at it for long enough that the looking itself became an answer. Priya said quietly, 4. Both men looked at her. I pulled the IEP records last week, she said. 4 students have current evaluations that support this level of intervention. The other 15 were referred directly by Ms. Driscoll under the provisional placement provision. Provisional placement is supposed to be pending independent assessment. She paused. I checked the assessment request logs. Most of them are still pending. Some have been pending for 8 months. Driscoll's voice came out sharp. Ms. Nair, you do not have authorization to access. She has access to the same shared records portal that every staff member has access to, Ethan said. He looked at Garrett. 15 students placed in a funded intervention program without the evaluations required to justify the placement. He let that sit for exactly 2 seconds. Is the intervention program's budget allocation tied to enrollment numbers? Garrett's face did something that answered the question before his mouth did. Yes, he said. It came out smaller than his other answers. So more students in the program means more funding for the program. That is a significant oversimplification of how district resource allocation. Is it accurate? A long pause. The funding model does include an enrollment component, yes. Ethan closed the folder. He stood in that office with the folder under his arm and looked at the principal of his daughter's school and felt something move through him that was not anger exactly, because anger was too simple for what this was. This was the feeling of understanding a system completely, seeing exactly how it worked and what it had cost, and deciding in one clear moment what he was going to do about it. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. I need to make a call, he said. Garrett looked at the phone. Of course, if you'd like some privacy. I'd like everyone to stay, Ethan said. I want you all to hear this conversation. He dialed a number from memory. It rang twice. A woman's voice answered, professional and direct. Superintendent Vance's office. This is Lieutenant Ethan Cole. I left a message this morning for Superintendent Vance regarding a formal inquiry into intervention program placement practices at Harlow Elementary. She said she would return my call before 3 p.m. A brief hold. Then a different voice, older, carrying the particular authority of someone who has been managing difficult situations for a long time and has stopped finding them difficult. Lieutenant Cole, I'm sorry for the delay. I've been reviewing what your message described with our district compliance officer. Driscoll went very still near the window. "Yes, ma'am," Ethan said. "I'm currently in Principal Garrett's office with Vice Principal Driscoll and Ms. Priya Nair. I have Ms. Nair's documentation in front of me, and I've just confirmed with Mr. Garrett that 15 of the 19 students currently enrolled in the Harlow Intervention Program do not have current independent evaluations supporting their placement." A pause on the line. Then, 15. "Yes, ma'am. I've also confirmed that 2 written complaints filed by Ms. Nair over the past 8 weeks have not been formally actioned or communicated back to the filing party." He paused. "I am requesting a district-level compliance review of the intervention program's enrollment records and a formal inquiry into the complaint response timeline." Another pause. Longer. "I'll be at Harlow Elementary within the hour." Driscoll made a sound that was not quite a word. Ethan looked at her directly. "Is there something you'd like to say, Ms. Driscoll?" She looked at Garrett. Garrett looked at his desk. Whatever support she had been expecting from that direction was not coming, and the realization of it moved across her face in a way that was visible to everyone in the room. "I want to contact my union representative," she said. "That's your right," Ethan said. "The superintendent will be here in an hour." He looked at Garrett. "I'm going to go sit with my daughter now. When Superintendent Vance arrives, I'd like to continue this conversation with her present." He turned toward the door. Then he stopped. He looked back at Garrett one more time, with the specific look of someone who wants to make sure something is understood before they leave a room. "Mr. Garrett," he said, "you received 2 complaints from a teacher who was fighting for her students. You put them in a queue, and you waited." He let that land. "My daughter has been in this program for 4 months. She has been coming home with her hands shaking, and she has been leaving voicemails telling me school is fine because she learned, somewhere in those 4 months, that what was happening to her was not something worth troubling her father about." His voice stayed level the entire time, completely level. "She is 8 years old. She made that calculation herself, because nobody in this building made it for her." He held Garrett's gaze. "I want you to think about that while we wait for the superintendent." He walked out. The corridor was quiet. He went back to room 112 and opened the door and found Priya's student aide sitting with the 2 other children from the session, who had been given snacks and a coloring activity, and were doing the careful, absorbed work of children who understood that adults were handling something, and had decided the best contribution they could make was to be very quiet. Maya was at the table where Ethan had left her. Delta was on the floor beside her chair, his head in her lap now, her fingers moving slowly through his fur in the repetitive, soothing motion of a child who has found the one thing in the room that feels safe and is holding on to it. She looked up when Ethan came in. "Is it done?" she asked. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat down, which was not something he usually did, sit across from Maya at a table. He usually sat beside her. The deliberateness of the position, face to face, level with her, registered in her eyes. "Not yet," he said, "but it started." "Is Miss Driscoll in trouble?" Ethan looked at his daughter, at the steadiness she was trying to hold in her face, and the effort it was costing her, and the 8 years of life behind that effort. "Some things that have been wrong for a long time are going to get fixed," he said. "That's what's happening right now." Maya looked at Delta. "He stayed with me the whole time," she said. "I know. Even when you left, he didn't follow you. He stayed." "He knows where he needs to be," Ethan said. Maya's fingers stopped moving in Delta's fur. She looked at her father across the table with the specific directness of a child who has decided to ask the thing she has been not asking. "Why didn't you come home sooner?" The question landed in the room without accusation. She was not blaming him. She was asking the way people ask things when they have been carrying the question for a long time, and have finally decided the answer matters more than the risk of asking. "I couldn't," he said. "The mission ran longer than it was supposed to. I couldn't control that." "I know," Maya said. "I know you couldn't." She looked down at Delta. "I just wanted you to know that it was hard." "I know it was hard," Ethan said. "I'm sorry I wasn't here." Maya nodded. Once. Small. The nod of someone who has accepted an answer that is not the answer they wanted, but is the honest one, and has decided that the honest one is enough. "Dad," she said. "Yeah?" "Delta knew I was scared, before you even came in. He knew before anyone told him." Ethan looked at Delta, who was watching Maya with those amber eyes, steady and warm and entirely without agenda. "He always knows," he said. "How?" "He pays attention," Ethan said. "He pays attention to you specifically. That's his job, and he's very good at his job." Maya thought about that for a moment. Then she said, very quietly, "I wish someone here had paid attention." Ethan did not have an answer for that was adequate. He did not try to find one. He reached across the table and put his hand over both of hers, the hands that had been shaking 40 minutes ago and were quieter now, still not quite steady, but quieter. And he held them there. Delta's tail swept the floor once. He pressed his head harder into Maya's lap. She leaned forward slightly, into the weight of him, into the warmth and the steadiness of it, and closed her eyes for a moment. Somewhere at the other end of the building, a door opened, and footsteps moved down the corridor, with the particular forward momentum of someone who had been told the situation and had decided it required speed. Superintendent Carol Vance had arrived 40 minutes early. Superintendent Carol Vance was 61 years old and had been running this district for 9 of them. And the thing that made her effective, the thing that had made her effective in 3 districts before this one, was that she did not waste time deciding whether a situation was serious. She arrived, she assessed, and she moved. The political calculation happened simultaneously, not before. She had learned that the administrators who calculated first and acted second were the ones who ended up on the wrong side of things that eventually became public record. She walked into Garrett's office at 2:47 p.m. with her compliance officer beside her and a district advocate for special education 2 steps behind, and she looked at the 3 people already in the room. Garrett behind his desk, Driscoll near the window, Ethan standing with Priya's folder under his arm. And she took all of it in approximately 4 seconds. "Lieutenant Cole," she said, "thank you for the call this morning." "Thank you for coming early," Ethan said. She looked at Garrett. "Howard?" Not a grieving, a signal. Garrett straightened in his chair. "Carol, I think there's been some mischaracterization of—" "I'd like to start with the enrollment records," Vance said. She looked at her compliance officer, a precise woman in her 40s named Dr. Helen Marsh, who had been doing this work long enough that very little surprised her, and everything troubled her. "Helen, the IEP files for all 19 students currently enrolled in the intervention program." Garrett opened his mouth. "Those records contain protected student information, and accessing them without— The district compliance office has standing authorization to access all student records in the context of a formal compliance review," Marsh said. She was already opening her laptop. "I'll need your record system login, Howard." Garrett looked at Driscoll. Driscoll did not look back at him. She was watching Vance with the expression of a person who has been running a particular game for a long time and has just realized the table has changed. "Howard," Vance said, "the login." He gave it. Marsh worked quietly for 4 minutes while the room held the specific tension of people waiting for something they already know the answer to. Ethan stood where he was. He did not pace. He had learned a long time ago that pacing told other people things about your internal state that were better kept private. Marsh looked up. 15 of the 19 enrolled students do not have a current independent educational evaluation supporting placement at this level of intervention. Of those 15, 11 have been enrolled for more than 90 days, which exceeds the provisional placement window under district policy by a minimum of 30 days. She paused. 3 students have IEPs that explicitly recommend against pull-out intervention in favor of in-class support. They are currently receiving the opposite of what their plans require. The room was silent. Vance looked at Driscoll. "Karen?" Driscoll straightened. She had made a decision, visible in real time, to go to the defense she had been building in her head since Ethan walked into room 112 45 minutes ago. The provisional placement provision exists precisely to allow for timely support while evaluations are pending. I was acting within the letter of district policy. The parents signed enrollment consent forms. The program has produced measurable outcomes and the funding model. "The funding model," Ethan said. Driscoll stopped. "I want to make sure I understand this correctly," Ethan said. He looked at Vance. "The intervention program receives supplemental district funding based on enrollment numbers." "That's accurate," Vance said. Her voice was careful. "So the financial incentive for this program runs in direct proportion to how many students are placed in it. The funding model is designed to ensure adequate resources for students who need. Ms. Driscoll has the authority to provisionally place students without external evaluation. Within the policy parameters, yes, and the evaluation requests that would either confirm or end those provisional placements. Those are processed by the District Assessment Office," Marsh said quietly. She had been following this the way someone follows a thread they have been looking for. "Referrals come from the program. The assessment office schedules them." "How many assessment requests from this program are currently in queue?" Ethan asked. Marsh typed, looked at the screen, looked at it again. 14. "And the average processing time?" "The standard timeline is 6 to 8 weeks. She scrolled. "The oldest pending referral from this program is dated 8 months ago." Vance turned to look at Driscoll. Driscoll said, "The assessment office has a significant backlog district-wide. That is not within my control." "Did you follow up on any of those 14 referrals?" Vance asked. A pause. "I submitted the referrals through the standard channel." "Did you follow up?" The pause this time was its own answer. Priya spoke from where she was standing near the door, quietly and with the particular steadiness of someone who has been rehearsing this moment for 6 months. "I followed up," she said, 3 times. I contacted the assessment office directly about Maya Cole's evaluation request. I was told it was in queue. I asked the estimated completion date. I was told they couldn't provide one. She looked at Ethan. That was in November. Maya was placed in October. Ethan nodded once. He looked at Vance. My daughter has been in a placement that was never properly evaluated, in a program that is financially incentivized to enroll students regardless of their actual need, run by a vice principal who has been telling an 8-year-old girl that her physical pain is an avoidance strategy. He said it the same way he said everything, level and clear, without drama, because the facts did not require drama. They required only to be said. I want to know what happens next. Vance looked at him for a moment. Then she looked at Driscoll. Karen, I'm going to ask you to go home for the remainder of the day. Do not access any district systems. Do not contact parents or staff regarding this matter. I will be in touch with you directly by tomorrow morning. Driscoll's composure finally cracked. Not dramatically, in the specific small way that things crack when they have been held together by will alone for too long, and the will gives out. "I have been running this program for 6 years," she said. Her voice was not loud. It was tight. "I have served hundreds of students. I have built something that works. One parent walks in after 7 months away, and suddenly everything I have built is—" "Karen," Vance's voice was not unkind, but it was final. "Go home." Driscoll picked up her clipboard from Garrett's desk. She walked to the door. She stopped for a moment with her hand on the frame and looked at the room, at Garrett, who was still not meeting her eyes, at Priya, who was, at Ethan, who was watching her with the same calm assessment he had been watching her with since room 112, and at Vance, who had already moved on to the next thing. Then she walked out. The sound of her footsteps going down the corridor was the sound of 6 years of unchallenged authority walking away from itself. And nobody in the room said anything until it faded. Garrett looked at his desk. He looked at it for a long time. Then he said, not to anyone in particular, not defending himself, just saying it, "I should have acted on the first complaint." Priya looked at him. Her voice when she answered was not generous, but it was honest. "Yes," she said, "you should have." Garrett nodded. He picked up a pen, put it down. "What do you need from me?" he said to Vance. "Full cooperation with Helen's review, every enrollment record, every assessment referral, every complaint log, all of it." Vance looked at him. "And I need you to draft parent notification letters for all 19 families today. Not form letters, individual letters, specific to each child, acknowledging that the placement process did not meet required standards and committing to independent evaluation at no cost to the family." Garrett wrote that down. "The letters go out tonight," Vance said. "Not tomorrow, tonight." Garrett nodded. Vance looked at Ethan. "Lieutenant Cole, I want to speak with you and Maya directly before you leave today. And I want to assure you that what you've described this afternoon is being treated as a compliance failure at the program level, not an isolated incident." She paused. "Ms. Nair's documentation is going into the formal record as primary evidence. She will be credited accordingly." Priya looked at the floor, then up. She pressed her lips together and nodded once. The nod of someone who has been doing something hard in private for a very long time and has just had it acknowledged in front of the people who should have acknowledged it 6 months ago. It cost her something to hold steady in that moment, and she held steady anyway. "Thank you," she said. Ethan looked at her. "You kept fighting when it would have been easier to stop. That matters." Priya made a sound that was not quite a response. She looked at the window for a second, then back. "Maya made it easier," she said. "She tried so hard every day. Every single day she came into my classroom and she tried. I couldn't stop fighting for that." The room held that for a moment. Then Ethan's phone buzzed. He looked at it. A text from the student aide he had left with Maya and Delta in room 112. Just 5 words. Delta made her laugh. He showed it to no one. He read it twice. He put the phone back in his pocket and felt something loosen in his chest that had been tight since the flight home. Since the voicemail. Since the sound he had heard through the door of room 112 that had told him everything he needed to know before a single word was spoken. "I'm going to go back to my daughter," he said to Vance. "Of course. I'll come find you in 20 minutes. He walked out of Garrett's office and down the corridor toward room 112, and when he opened the door, he found Maya sitting on the floor, which was not where he had left her. She had moved from the chair to the floor, with her back against the table leg, and Delta was curled beside her, with his head in her lap and his eyes closed. And Maya was talking to him in the low, private voice that people use with animals when they have decided the animal is the safest listener available. She stopped when she heard the door. "Hey, Bug." "Hey." She looked up at him. "Is it over?" He sat down on the floor beside her, which required him to lower himself carefully because his left knee had not forgiven Kandahar, and probably never would. And Delta opened one eye to acknowledge his arrival and then closed it again. "The part where nobody was paying attention," Ethan said, "is over." Maya thought about that. What happens to Ms. Driscoll? That's being figured out by people whose job it is to figure it out. Is it bad? What happens to her? Ethan looked at his daughter, at the question behind the question, the specific texture of concern that only children have, the ability to be angry at someone and still worry about what happens to them. "She has to answer for what she did," he said. "That's fair." Maya nodded slowly. "She wasn't always mean," she said. "Some days she was okay. Some days she tried to help." She looked at Delta. "She just stopped seeing me, like I was a problem instead of a person." Ethan did not say anything for a moment. He let his daughter's words sit in the room because they deserved to sit there. "You know what I think," he said finally. "What?" "I think you just described something that a lot of adults spend their whole careers trying to understand. The difference between seeing a problem and seeing a person." He put his arm around her. "And you figured it out at 8 years old." Maya leaned into him. "Delta always sees me," she said. "He does. Even when he's asleep." Delta's ear flicked. His tail moved once without his eyes opening. Maya laughed, small and genuine and completely unguarded. It was the best sound in the building. Ethan held his daughter and felt Delta's warmth against his other side, and thought about the voicemail, and the 6 months of incident logs, and 2 complaint forms in a queue, and 15 children in a program they should not have been in. He thought about what it had taken to get to this floor, to this moment, to this particular small laugh. He thought about Priya Nair fighting alone for 6 months, with a folder in her hand and nowhere to put it. Then he stopped thinking about all of it because Maya was leaning against his arm, and Delta was doing the one-eared listening thing he did when he was pretending to be asleep and wasn't. And outside the door of room 112, for the first time in 4 months, nobody was telling his daughter that her pain was a strategy. That was enough for right now. That was, in fact, everything. Superintendent Vance came to room 112 23 minutes later, not 20, and the 3 extra minutes were visible in her face. She had been on the phone. Ethan could tell from the particular set of her jaw that the calls had not been simple, and that she had made decisions during them that were going to have consequences she was already managing. She stood in the doorway and looked at Ethan and Maya on the floor, with Delta between them, and she did something that Ethan had not expected. She did not immediately go into administrator mode. She just stood there for a moment and looked at the 3 of them with the expression of a woman who had been in education for 35 years, and still, underneath all the compliance reviews and policy language and district liability calculations, remembered what the whole thing was supposed to be about. Then she came in, and she sat down in one of the small chairs at the table, which put her at Maya's eye level. And she looked at Maya directly and said, "You must be Maya." Maya looked at her carefully. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Carol Vance. I'm in charge of all the schools in this district." She paused. "I want to apologize to you. What happened in this room today, and what has been happening for the past 4 months, should not have happened. The adults in this building were supposed to make sure it didn't, and they didn't do their jobs." She said it plainly. No hedging, no policy language, just the fact of it, delivered to an 8-year-old with the same directness she would have used with anyone else. "I'm sorry." Maya looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, "My hands hurt a lot." "I know," Vance said. "I read Ms. Nair's notes." "I told Ms. Driscoll." "I know that too." "She said it was because I wasn't trying hard enough." Vance held Maya's gaze without flinching. She was wrong, and she will not be coming back to this school. Maya absorbed that. Her hand moved slowly in Delta's fur. "What about the other kids? The ones in the program who aren't me?" Vance looked at the child, and her expression shifted in a way that was not performed. "Their families are being contacted tonight. Every one of them." Maya nodded. Then she looked at her father. Something in her face said she had asked the questions she needed to ask and had received the answers she needed to receive, and was now ready to let the adults finish the adult portion of the proceeding. Ethan recognized the look. He had seen it in the mirror a few times himself. Vance stood. She looked at Ethan. "Can we speak in the hall?" He got up carefully, knee complaining the way it always complained when he had been on the floor too long, and followed her out. The corridor was quiet. Everyone else had moved to other parts of the building or gone home, and it was just the two of them, with the particular intimacy of a hallway conversation that was going to cover things neither party had said out loud yet. "Karen Driscoll has been placed on paid administrative leave effective immediately," Vance said. "She has been advised not to contact students, families, or staff. Her union representative has been notified." She paused. "The State Board of Education has been contacted about a potential review of her administrative credentials. That process will take time. I want you to know it has been initiated." "What about the evaluation backlog?" Ethan said. 14 referrals pending, some for 8 months. The district is contracting an independent assessment firm to clear the backlog within 60 days. All 19 families will receive priority scheduling at no cost. She looked at him. "I also want to be honest with you about something. Please. This program has been operating in a way that should have triggered a review long before today. Howard Garrett received 2 complaints and did not act on them with the urgency they required. That is a failure of leadership, and he knows it." She stopped. "I am not going to pretend that the complaint review process worked the way it was supposed to, because it did not. And the reason it did not is partly structural and partly human, and both of those things need to be fixed." "What does fixing the structural part look like?" Ethan said. "The complaint review timeline is being revised. 30-day maximum response from the date of filing. Any complaint involving a student with a documented disability goes directly to the district compliance office, not into a building-level queue." She said it with the precision of someone who had worked out the details during those 3 extra minutes on the phone. "That change is going into the policy manual this week, not next month. This week." Ethan looked at her. "Ms. Nair filed those complaints at personal professional risk. She had no guarantee anyone was coming. She kept the documentation anyway." "I know. Her career at this school should not be affected by what she did." "It won't be," Vance said. "I'm going to make that explicit in writing." She paused. "She is also going to be asked to help design the new staff training on disability inclusion and complaint response. Her documentation will be part of the curriculum." She looked at Ethan. "She did the work. She should get the credit." Ethan nodded. He looked down the corridor toward the front of the building where, somewhere beyond the doors, the rest of the afternoon was waiting with its ordinary requirements: driving home, making dinner, watching his daughter exist in the same space as him after 7 months of a satellite phone and careful voicemails. "Lieutenant Cole," Vance said, "can I ask you something?" "Yes, ma'am." "You called my office this morning, before you even came to the school. You already knew about the evaluation backlog and the complaint timeline and the IDEA placement requirements. She said it without accusation, just observation. You did that research from a deployment. I read Ms. Nair's portal message on the satellite connection, Ethan said. I had 16 hours on a transport plane to read everything else. Vance looked at him for a moment. Most parents wouldn't have known what questions to ask. Most parents haven't spent 12 years in environments where the wrong question gets people killed, he said. You learn to ask the right ones fast. She held his gaze. Your daughter is very lucky. My daughter, Ethan said, has been fighting alone in that room for 4 months because the adults who were supposed to protect her were managing process instead of protecting a child. She's not lucky. She's tough. Those are different things, and she shouldn't have had to be. Vance accepted that without defending against it. No, she said. She shouldn't have. He went back inside. The next hour moved with the specific momentum of institutional machinery that is finally engaged. Marsh worked through the enrollment records with the methodical precision of someone who understood that the thoroughness of this documentation would determine the strength of everything that came after it. Garrett drafted the parent notification letters at his desk with the particular care of a man who understood, now, that careful was the least he could offer. Priya Nair gave her formal statement in the conference room down the hall, with Vance's advocate present, reading from her incident log in the clear, unhurried voice of someone who had been waiting to say these things in a room where they would be recorded. The major twist arrived at 4:15 p.m., when Marsh came to find Ethan in room 112 with her laptop and a look on her face that said she had found something she had not been looking for. I need to show you something, she said. Ethan followed her to the conference room. She turned the laptop toward him. I was cross-referencing the intervention program enrollment numbers against the district budget allocation records for the past 3 years, she said. The program has grown from 7 students in the first year to 19 this year. The per-student funding allocation has remained constant, so the total budget for the program has grown by approximately 270% over 3 years. She paused. I pulled the expenditure records to see where the additional funding was going. Ethan looked at the screen. 40% of the program budget is allocated to what the records describe as specialist consultation fees, Marsh said. I pulled the vendor records. She pointed at the screen. The consultation services are provided by a private practice. The practice is registered to a Karen M. Driscoll. The room went very quiet. She was billing the district for her own consulting services, Ethan said. Through a separate business entity, Marsh said. The approvals on the expenditures go through the program director, which is also Driscoll. She was authorizing payments to herself. Ethan sat down, not because he needed to, because the specific weight of what he was looking at required a different posture. He looked at the screen, at the numbers, at the name on the vendor registration, at 6 years of a program that had been growing not because more children needed it, but because more children in it meant more funding, and more funding meant more money flowing through a billing arrangement that had been designed to be invisible. How much? He said. Marsh's voice was very careful. Over 3 years, approximately $140,000. Ethan pressed his hands flat on the table. I'm contacting the district's legal counsel and the State Education Fraud Office, Marsh said. This goes beyond a compliance review. She looked at him. I want you to know that this is separate from the harm done to your daughter and to the other students. Both things are real. Both things are going to be addressed. The harm to the children is the primary thing, Ethan said. Yes, Marsh said. It is. He went back to Maya. She was awake and sitting up and had been given a snack by the student aide and was eating crackers with the focused appreciation of a child who who has been through a significant emotional afternoon and has arrived at the stage where crackers are exactly right. Delta was sitting beside her, watching her eat with the specific alert attention he reserved for situations where food was present and hope was possible. "He wants one," Maya said when Ethan came in. "He always wants one." "Can he have one?" "Half of one." Maya broke a cracker carefully in half and held it out. Delta took it from her fingers with the delicacy of a dog who had been trained to take things gently and had decided, in this specific case, that gentleness was also what he wanted to offer. His tail swept the floor twice. Maya watched him chew. Then she looked at her father. "Something else happened," she said. "I can tell." He sat beside her. He thought about how much to say, and then decided that Maya had earned honesty. "Ms. Driscoll was doing something wrong with the school's money," he said, "in addition to everything else." Maya processed that. "Is she going to jail?" "That depends on decisions made by people whose job it is to make them." "Do you think she should?" Ethan looked at his daughter. At the direct, uncomplicated moral clarity of a child who had not yet learned to soften questions that did not require softening. "I think she should answer for what she did," he said. "All of it." Maya nodded. She fed Delta the second half of the cracker. "Ms. Nair knew something was wrong," she said. "She always asked me how I was after the sessions. Every time. She never forgot." "I know. She kept records of everything. For 6 months. Is she in trouble for helping?" "No," Ethan said. "She is the opposite of in trouble." Maya relaxed in a way that was visible. "Good," she said. "She deserves good things." Priya appeared in the doorway at that exact moment, finished with her statement, and heard the last 4 words. And her face did something she did not entirely manage to control. She pressed her lips together and looked at Maya and said, "Thank you, Maya." Maya looked at her. "Thank you for not stopping." Priya came into the room and sat down beside Maya on the other side from Ethan, and the 3 of them sat, with Delta stretched across the floor in front of them, his head on his paws, his amber eyes moving from face to face, in the way he had of monitoring everyone in his circle simultaneously, without appearing to. "Dad?" Maya said. "Yeah?" "Can Delta come to school with me sometimes?" Priya looked at Ethan. Ethan looked at Priya. Something passed between them that was almost a smile. "Vance mentioned something about that, actually," Ethan said. Maya turned to look at him. "Really?" "She said she wanted to talk about having Delta come in to work with some of the students. Said she thought it would be good for the kids to see what a real working dog looks like." He paused. "And maybe good for the kids to understand what it means when someone shows up for you without being asked." Maya looked at Delta. Delta looked back at her with those amber eyes that held, as always, nothing complicated. Just attention. Just presence. Just the absolute and unconditional communication of an animal that has made his priorities clear and intends to keep them. "He'd be good at that," Maya said. "He's good at everything," Ethan said. "He'd be embarrassed if you told him that." Delta's tail moved. Maya laughed. And for the second time that afternoon, in a room that had held a lot of things today that were not laughter, the sound of it filled every corner and left no space for anything else. Outside in the parking lot, Driscoll's car was gone. The space where it had been was just a space now, ordinary and unremarkable, the way spaces always look when the thing that was wrong has been removed from them. Garrett was still at his desk, finishing the last of the parent notification letters when Vance's car pulled out. He finished the last letter at 5:47 p.m. 19 letters, each one specific, each one honest, each one signed with his name at the bottom. He sat with them for a moment before he sent them. Then he sent them. He did not feel better after. He had not expected to. Some things you do not do to feel better. You do them because they are required, and because you should have done them 6 weeks ago. And the fact that you are doing them now, late and inadequate, is still better than not doing them at all. He turned off his desk lamp and sat in the quiet of his office and thought about the 2 complaint forms in his review queue and the 8 weeks they had sat there, and the specific decision he had made each time he had seen them in the queue to let the process work at the process's pace. He thought about Maya on the floor of room 112 with her father and her dog and the cracker, and the way she had said she just wanted someone to pay attention. He sat with that for a long time. Then he got up and went home, because there was nothing else he could do tonight. And tomorrow there would be more to do, and he intended to do it. The 19 parent notification letters went out at 5:47 p.m., and by 7:30 that evening, Garrett's phone had received 11 calls back. He answered every one of them himself. He did not let them go to voicemail. He did not route them to the district office or the parent liaison or anyone else whose job it was to manage difficult conversations on behalf of administrators who did not want to have them. He answered the phone, and he said what needed to be said, and he listened to what needed to be heard. And when parents cried, which 3 of them did, he did not rush them off the line. It was the most useful thing he had done in 4 months, and he knew it. And that knowledge was its own kind of punishment, and he accepted it. Ethan did not know about the calls until Priya texted him the next morning. He was in the kitchen making breakfast when his phone buzzed. He read the text. He read it again. He put the phone face down on the counter and finished scrambling the eggs and thought about a man sitting alone in his office at 5:47 p.m., finally doing the thing he should have done 6 weeks ago, and deciding that was worth something, even if it was not worth enough. Maya came in while he was plating the eggs, moving through the kitchen with her forearm crutches in the particular rhythm she had developed over 2 years that was entirely her own, efficient and unhesitant. The rhythm of someone who had decided her way of moving through the world was her way, and had stopped apologizing for it. Delta followed her in and went directly to his water bowl with the focused purpose of a dog who had been patient about the water situation for several minutes and had decided his patience had run its course. "Ms. Nair texted me," Maya said. She held up her tablet where the message was visible. A short text from a school-issued contact system, the kind teachers use to communicate with parents. 3 sentences. "Maya, I want you to know that what you went through was not your fault, and never was. You were brave every single day. See you Monday." Maya put the tablet on the table and sat down and looked at her eggs. "She texted me directly," she said. "Not you, me. She knows who the message was for," Ethan said. Maya thought about that. "I want to do something for her," she said. "Not a card, something real." "What did you have in mind?" "I don't know yet. Something that says, 'I saw what she did.'" She picked up her fork. "The way she saw what was happening to me." Ethan sat across from her. Delta finished with his water and came and sat beside Maya's chair, with the expectant air of a dog who understood that breakfast proximity often yielded results. "When you figure out what it is," Ethan said, "we'll do it." Maya nodded. She ate. Delta's eyes tracked every forkful with the dedication of a professional. "Dad," Maya said. "Yeah?" "Are you going to be deployed again soon?" He had been expecting this question since the parking lot the day before. He had been preparing for it the way he prepared for things he could not control, by deciding what was true and saying it plainly. "Probably," he said. "Not immediately, but probably." Maya moved her eggs around her plate. "Okay," she said. "Okay? I mean, it's not okay. I don't want you to go." She looked up at him. "But I know you have to, and I know you come back." She looked at Delta. "And Delta will be here, Delta will be here, Ethan confirmed. Maya reached down and put her hand on Delta's head without looking at him, the automatic gesture of someone who has incorporated another being so completely into their sense of safety that reaching for them requires no more thought than reaching for a railing on a staircase. Delta leaned into it. "He slept outside my door last night," Maya said. "I heard him. He didn't come in. He just slept right outside." Ethan looked at Delta. Delta looked back at him with the calm, amber eyes that said he was aware of being discussed and had no objection to the content. "He does that," Ethan said, "when he thinks someone needs watching over." "Does he do it for you?" "Sometimes." Maya was quiet for a moment. Then, "Good." 3 days later, Superintendent Vance called Ethan with the update he had been expecting. The State Education Fraud Office had opened a formal investigation into the billing records Marsh had found. The consultation fees, $140,000 over 3 years, routed through Driscoll's private practice, were under review. The union had been notified. Driscoll had retained an attorney. Additionally, Vance said, the district compliance review had expanded. 2 other elementary schools in the district had intervention programs with similar structures: enrollment-based funding, program director referral authority, assessment backlogs that made provisional placements effectively permanent. Neither had reached the level of Harlow. Both were being reviewed. "How did this not get caught sooner?" Ethan said. He was not asking her to defend herself. He was asking because he needed to understand the mechanism. You could not fix what you did not understand. The funding model creates an incentive that looks, on paper, like responsible resource allocation, Vance said. More students identified, more support provided, more funding secured. The problem only becomes visible when you ask whether the students actually needed the support at that level. And nobody was asking. Because asking was inconvenient. Because asking required someone to look closely at a program run by a 20-year veteran administrator with a clean record and tell her that her numbers looked wrong. Vance paused. "People don't like doing that. I'm not excusing it. I'm explaining the mechanism so we can break it." What breaks it? Independent review. Mandatory external evaluation before any placement exceeds 60 days. Complaint timelines with actual consequences for missing them. She paused. And people like Ms. Nair. People who keep the records even when nobody is listening yet. Ethan said, "She should be protected from this going forward. Formally. In writing." "She has a letter from me on district letterhead dated yesterday," Vance said. "It's in her permanent file. It acknowledges her advocacy by name and makes explicit that it was correct and that her career standing will not be affected by it." She paused. "She also has a standing invitation to present at the district's Fall Professional Development Conference. Her documentation is going to be the centerpiece of the new complaint response training." Ethan was quiet for a moment. He was standing in the front yard, watching Delta run the perimeter of the property, the way he ran every new environment, systematic and thorough, because that was what he did, and because the running was also just running, and Delta had always liked to run. "Lieutenant Cole," Vance said, "I want to ask you something." "Yes, ma'am." "The district is developing mandatory staff training on disability inclusion, trauma-informed practice, and the complaint response process. I want a parent voice in the design. Someone who has been on the receiving end of what happens when the system fails." She stopped. "I'd like that voice to be yours, if you're willing." Ethan watched Delta loop back toward him at a dead run, and then veer off at the last second because something in the grass had caught his attention. He thought about Maya at the table in room 112, saying she just wanted someone to pay attention. He thought about Priya Nair keeping a folder for 6 months in a filing cabinet behind the supply requisitions, because she understood that the document might someday matter, and she was going to make sure it was there when it did. "Yes," he said. On one condition. Name it. Ms. Nair presents alongside me. She did the work. She should be in the room when it becomes the lesson. Vance said, Agreed. The training session happened on a Thursday morning 6 weeks later. 64 teachers and administrators in the District Professional Development Center. Ethan in his NWU uniform, Delta at his heel. Priya Nair beside him, with her incident log, now formatted into a training document that every person in the room received as they sat down. He did not lecture. He told them what he heard in the hallway, the specific quality of that laughter through the door. The moment Delta went still before Ethan had processed what he was hearing, because Delta had been trained to recognize threat, and what was happening to Maya registered as threat before a single conscious thought had been completed. He told them about the voicemail, about Maya's voice being careful and too cheerful because she was 8 years old, and had decided that protecting her father from what was happening to her was her responsibility. He let that sit in the room for a moment, because it deserved to sit there. I have made decisions in environments where the wrong call costs human lives, he said. I have done that with less information and less time than any of you will ever need to make the decision to respond to a complaint filed by a teacher who is telling you a child is being hurt. He looked at the room. The most dangerous enemy is not the one who is obviously hostile. It is the one who has convinced themselves they are helping. Because that person is not going to stop. They are going to keep going with full confidence and full authority until someone asks the right questions. He looked at Priya. Ms. Nair asked the right questions for 6 months. She documented the answers. She filed the complaints. She kept the folder. She did all of it knowing that nobody was required to listen, and that listening might never come. He looked back at the room. What she did is not exceptional. It should not be exceptional. It should be the floor. It should be the absolute minimum of what this profession asks of the people in it. The room was very quiet. A young teacher in the third row raised her hand. First year. The specific combination of earnest attention and concealed terror that first-year teachers wear until they develop something more permanent. What made Delta go to Maya first? She asked. Before you even assessed the situation. What was it? Ethan looked at Delta, sitting at his left heel, with his amber eyes moving slowly across the room in the calm, comprehensive way he monitored every space he occupied. He was trained to detect threat and respond to distress, Ethan said. But that's the technical answer. The real answer is that he was paying attention to her specifically. She was his person in that room, and he knew it. And when she needed someone, he went to her without waiting to be told. He looked at the young teacher. That's not a skill you can train into a dog. That's what loyalty actually looks like when it's real. He let that land. That is the entire lesson, he said. Every child in every classroom you will ever stand in front of needs someone whose first response to their distress is to go to them, not to assess whether the distress is appropriate, not to determine whether the timeline allows for a response, to go to them. He looked at the room. Delta did it in 4 steps. You can do it too. The applause that followed was not the polite kind. It was the kind that happens when a room full of people has been told something they already knew and needed to hear said out loud by someone who meant it completely. Priya presented after him. She walked the room through the folder, through each entry in the incident log, through the specific language of each complaint form and the specific silence that followed each one. She did not perform anger. She did not perform vindication. She just read the record clearly and let the record speak for itself, which was more powerful than either of the other options would have been. When she finished, she looked at the room and said, I kept those records because Maya tried every single day. She came into my classroom after every intervention session, and she tried. I could not stop fighting for that." She paused. "Every child in your classroom is trying. Some of them are trying in ways you can see easily. Some of them are trying in ways that look, from the outside, like not trying at all." She looked at the young teacher in the third row. "Learn the difference. It will be the most important thing you ever do in this job." After the session, Ethan found Vance in the corridor. She looked at him with the expression of someone who had seen a room change and knew it. "Thank you," she said. "Thank Ms. Nair," he said. "I showed up once. She showed up for 6 months." He drove home with Delta in the back seat. Maya was at school. Regular Friday. Ms. Nair's classroom. He had dropped her off that morning, and she had gone through the front doors of Harlow Elementary with her chin up and her crutches finding their rhythm and her backpack over one shoulder, and she had not looked back. He had watched her go and felt something settle in him that had been unsettled for a long time. His phone buzzed at 2:15 p.m. A text from Priya. 2 sentences. Maya raised her hand 4 times today. She answered 3 correctly, and on the 4th one, the class clapped. He read it in the parking lot of a hardware store, where he had stopped for no reason he could name, except that he needed a moment, and the parking lot was there. Delta pressed his nose against the window from the back seat. Ethan reached back without looking and put his hand flat on the glass. Delta pushed against it from the other side. That was the whole of the moment. He drove home. He made dinner. He picked Maya up at 3:30, and she got into the truck and immediately began telling him something complicated that had happened at recess, involving a disagreement about the rules of a game and who had been right, and whether being right was even the most important thing, or whether letting it go was smarter, and she needed his opinion. He gave it. She argued with his opinion. He revised it. She considered the revision. Delta huffed from the back seat with the air of an animal who had a clear position on the matter and found the human deliberative process unnecessarily extended. Maya laughed, real and unguarded, and completely her own. The laugh of a child who has been reminded that the world contains things worth laughing at. Ethan drove and listened and thought about none of the large things. Not the deployment that would eventually come. Not the investigation still running its course. Not the 64 teachers in a professional development room learning to look more closely at the children in their care. Not the folder in a district file cabinet that was now required reading for every administrator in the system. He thought about his daughter's voice in a parking lot on a Thursday afternoon, talking about a recess dispute with the full investment of someone who has decided her opinions matter and is not going to stop having them. And about a German shepherd in the back seat who had known before the door opened that someone needed him and had not waited to be asked. Some missions do not come with orders. Some enemies do not wear uniforms. Some victories arrive quietly in the form of a child with her chin up and 4 raised hands and a laugh that has stopped being careful. Ethan Cole had been in combat in 4 countries and had earned decorations he did not talk about for actions he would not describe. And none of it, not one moment of it, had ever felt as clear and complete as the sound of his daughter laughing in the seat beside him on an ordinary Friday afternoon in Coronado, California, with Delta's head out the window and the road going home. Amen.